Okay, well, good evening and welcome to the fourth annual People's Powerhouse Convention. My name's Steph and I work for the People's Powerhouse and we're really pleased to have you with us this evening. Our whole movement is about getting more and different people's voices heard in the conversations about the future of the North, and in particular, those voices that often are unheard, thinking about things like austerity and COVID and the fact that many communities are facing a double trauma at the moment. Not only are they facing the trauma of COVID, but they're facing the trauma of years and years of inequality. And we think that there is space for a conversation and a different conversation about the future of the North. I'm really pleased to be here with you this evening. I'm here with my colleague Johnny, and we're just here really to listen, to take notes, to learn from you guys, and to feed back to our board.
Thank you, Stephanie. I'm really pleased for this session, 3Cs, Community, Collaboration and Creativity. I have here today Ikra Jodiri, who is a performer, arts facilitator, researcher, writer, and part of the Brown Girls Do It. We have Caitlin Gleeson, who is a theatre maker, writer, producer, facilitator. Oh, these guys are so talented. It's like, whoa, how many roles do they need? And we have Josh Wilkinson, performer, arts facilitator, filmmaker, and also does an online Instagram called Chatting. And lovely to have them here today. You know, they're taking over, this is their space, and they're going to look at some of the themes that this conference is exploring. And handing over to you. And at any point, please do feel free to ask questions in the chat. We will come to them at some point. Thank you.
Perfect. Thanks very much, Debbie. So hello and thanks everyone. Nice to see everyone. So as Debbie was saying then, we are sort of multi-tasking through life with all the bits and bobs that we do, and we'll give a bit of time each of us to talk about the practices that we do and the projects that we run, and we each of us were asked to do this, to talk about sort of the things that we do. And at first we were trying to, when we were coming up with a name, when we were coming up with what the theme of this was going to be, we sort of had to find what our common ground was, and the thing that did come up was the community, collaboration and creativity. That is something that was important to all of us in all of the work that we do, and so that's why we're here today with the 3Cs, which are community, collaboration and creativity, and hopefully we'll share how we use those three things and how those things are important in the stuff that we do. We all know each other roughly from Contact Theatre, which is in Manchester. I don't know if you know of Contact Theatre, but it's a great place. It's where I first got introduced to everything that I do now that is creative. And the theatre, as I say, it's based on Oxford Road, in like sort of just out the outskirts of the city centre. All three of us have done different projects at Contact, really. And like I say, it can really turn around a young person's life. The sort of target for Contact is for a young people's approach to decision making, and to always have young people at the centre of decision making at Contact. And they run all sorts of different projects. The main thing is, obviously, it's a theatre. They put on theatre shows, sort of a lot of the time showcasing current topics that are important to young people and to everyone, whilst also hosting loads of programmes around Greater Manchester. There was a project called The Agency that I started off doing. The Agency was something that started off in Brazil, and Contact brought it over to England. And that was where young people had the chance to get given £2,000 to make a project a reality. There's a project called Future Fires, which is ran yearly, which I know Caitlin and Ikra will talk about a bit more when they're speaking, because they went through that process. And they also have weekly music drop-ins at Contact Theatre, as well as just being a space that people can go to. And it's a really exciting point at Contact at the minute where we've got a new building. It's been refurbed, and we're not allowed in yet because of COVID, but we will be allowed in soon. But that's sort of a little bit of background on sort of how us three are connected through the work that we've done there at Contact. But yeah, just to, before we fully go into it and before we have time each to talk about our practice practices. I suppose this talk is quite casual. You can go and get yourself a drink and chill while you watch us have a natter about the stuff that we do. Sort of imagine, you know, it's a weekday, you're not in work, you sat watching Loose Women, you know, but they're not talking about if the royals are relevant or not. We're talking about creative practice. So before we go into that, I just wanted to show that and to show what the sort of vibe of this is. I've been putting some links into the chat as well. We haven't got anything to share throughout, but we want to put links in so you can follow our stuff if you want to. So first off, Caitlin is going to marvelously tell us a little bit about what she does. Caitlin, who are you? What do you do?
Thanks, Josh. That's a really nice intro to kind of how we all met and like what Contact does and where Contact's place in the city is. So thanks for that. As Josh said, my name's Caitlin. I'm a theatre maker, facilitator, writer and producer. I'm based in Manchester, but I'm not from there originally. I moved there 10 years ago to go to uni and I just stuck around because I quite liked it. And like a lot of people I meet in the arts in Manchester, I probably wouldn't have a career in the arts without being involved with Contact. I think they're a really important place in the arts ecology for a lot of people, particularly young people who are starting out. But you can trace people going back, you know, 10, 20 years who've like started their careers at Contact. I think that's a really nice place to think about. So I started working at Contact on the bar originally, which is my first job there. And I really enjoyed just being able to sit in and be kind of witness to all the kind of different crazy weird events that are going on at Contact. That was a really nice kind of introduction to what their work was. But I think working in the bar was actually really central to me getting future work in the arts, because being part of all those conversations and being kind of witness to everything that was going on was so important in terms of knowing what else there was to do and how people work through the arts. And I think I started working there on the bar when I was quite young. And I didn't really know a lot about how an arts organisation functioned, but once you're kind of in, you get to see everything. And Contact is so open about kind of asking young people what they need, what they want to kind of have a career, to start a career, and like showing you where to go. So from working in the bar, I started to apply for some of their participation programs. So the first thing I did was I was a young programmer and producer on Recon, which is a program that I think it's slightly different now to how it was back in, can't believe I was about to say the phrase back in my day, but there we are. But back in my day, we worked, there were 4 of us, we worked for a year on a program where we shadowed the programming team, saw how all of, how they found work to program in the main theatre spaces, how they went to Edinburgh. They took us to Edinburgh for free, that was great. And we got to produce a festival. So we produced a festival called Censored, which was themed around, it was multidisciplinary, so we took over the whole building, and it was themed around accessibility, and it was themed around Lola Olufemi. And she talks in it quite a lot about, like, in terms of justice, like the fact that we will need to kind of reorganise the world and think about how power structures impact our life and what we need to do with that. We can't just operate within the power structures that are making things unfair. We need to actively change them. And so I think that is incredibly important in my work, like through, and you know, sometimes through things like co-creation, co-design, we're actively refusing to have any kind of hierarchical structure, but that's quite difficult because the rest of the structures we sit in are still quite hierarchical. And I think I try and ensure, like through every project I'm in, that there is some opportunity for it to be co-created. There is an opportunity for that democracy there. But I wondered how you two think about like injustice and power structures and how that comes across in your work. Because I know just from knowing you guys that actually that is really central to a lot of your work. How do you think about the ways that we sit within these power structures?
I think I'll go first. I think it's been really, really interesting doing this podcast alongside, I think, a lot of the social movements that we've seen in the last 3 years, and also being an academic, or being in academia, I should say. And as part of that, sort of coming to sort of more theoretical ideas of structural inequalities and questions around movements like decolonizing education and things like that. So the last 3 years have been really interesting, because I think if you go through the podcast, we go from sort of like conversations about like watching Black Panther and how excited we were to see such a Black film on the big screen, And I think in many ways, like, our conversations have evolved so much because we're learning as we go. So one of the episodes that we did over the last, I think, few months actually of this summer, was we did an episode with Roxy from Kids of Colour, also another Future Fires project based in Greater Manchester. And Roxy was someone who started off doing short videos that interviewed young people of colour about their experiences of race, their experiences of racism, and it quickly morphed into something much bigger and more important, which ended up being quite focused around policing in Greater Manchester of young people of colour, and in sort of providing support for the families of young people of colour who are being unfairly policed. And so one of the more recent conversations we had, we talked about policing. We talked about our experiences of policing as people of colour, and how they differ, and how we really need to sit down sometimes and just think, okay, here's a structure that has always existed in our lives, but let's sit and question what it actually does. What does policing look like in a working class community, and how is that different from how policing looks like in a middle class community up the road? And I think being a young person from Cheetham Hill, like growing up in North Manchester, has been so formative, because things that have always been the inequalities that surrounded our communities as a Muslim person, as a South Asian person, as a woman from a traditionally sort of like repressive culture. It's been really interesting to finally start putting that into words through creative practice, and also to be able to ask other people about their experiences and watch them put things into words for the first time sometimes. And that's been really, really amazing. I think we've got a question that's come in as well. So I'm going to let Josh touch on this idea of injustice and inequality, but we've also got a really interesting question that's come in that I think we can also kind of weave into this conversation about the arts being increasingly seen as a social fix for communities, but they're always underfunded. And in the visual arts, there's this divide between quote unquote real art and then outreach and community art, which I guess is, we kind of straddle that boundary, and some of us are definitely more into the outreach and community art. Do you feel that this is the same in theatre or drama? So I'm going to throw that one to you guys, because that's your
area.
I
think I'll touch on that, and then going off the other question about structures and stuff as well. I think that it's really I was sort of doing sort of drama group stuff. I was part of that growing up, and also different arts organisations I joined because of that. And I knew that the arts and being creative was a way to express what I wanted to do. And then I suddenly, found that, there's certain arts programs that happen that are just sort of like they parachute in, and you do a session there for a week and then you're left without anything. And I think that that always left me to feel sort of like, well, you know what, sometimes I was left a bit worse off, because I felt like you'd gone through a process of then being sort of interacted with, and then there was no sort of end goal. I think that always sticks with me now for the work I do. I'm part of a collective in Manchester called Remodel Manchester, and we're a newly formed collective that formed out of an Erasmus Plus project, funnily enough, which was a European project we did. And we formed a Manchester group for this thing. And then we had this group formed now. We said, we don't want to just stop. We want to bring these changes and these things back to Manchester. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because within that group, there's myself, there's photographers, there's visual artists, there's filmmakers, podcasters, there's uni lecturers, there's counsellors, and there's people who run businesses and etc. And it's totally random. Like I always kind of relate it to the cast of Ice Age, when there's just a random group of people together that don't usually fit, but we really pride ourselves on that, and there's no hierarchy within that structure. It's about us being able to offer our sort of opinions and thoughts, but there's never one person who we look to make that decision. And I think that's really important, and it's something that works really well. I think going to this question, and I don't know if you want to elaborate a bit as well. Is it Nat at Hatch?
Yeah.
You want to elaborate a little bit as well? I see that you popped up on screen, so I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I've worked in gallery education and visual arts education, and now do festival making and all sorts for 15 years. So I've seen a lot of changes happen, and I suppose I kind of go back to the Arts Council new strategy for the next 10 years, thinking about Let's Create. And there's a lot of great things in the Let's Create strategy about democratizing arts and really looking at, nurturing talent and art coming from everywhere, and thinking about cultural capital as being, what surrounds you and what makes you, rather than the fact that you can go to a gallery or a theatre and be topped up in terms of cultural capital. I suppose what I worry about is that we've still got a hierarchy with men in suits who run white cube galleries and dictate what goes into those galleries, and that is still seen as the real art, and that what we're doing is the social fix, and that there is that power struggle between the work that we're doing. And if the Arts Council hasn't got the power to change it, where can we make the biggest difference in terms of collectively changing a long history of hierarchical attitudes?
Yeah, I think there's something that you just made me think of there, and it sort of leads in with what we're saying. I think that there is so much power in the audiences as well, and with the collectives and the groups that the circles that we work within, that can't be underestimated. I mean, I was at 19 and I didn't know what I was doing, and I still wouldn't now. I was an artist in residence at Home Theatre in Manchester, and for August of that year, there was 18 young artists who said, you can have the building for this time and do whatever you want. And we were like, yeah, sure, all right. You say that, it's not going to happen. And then it did. We got to do what we wanted, and it broke the box office records for that time, because we were allowed to do what we wanted. The stuff that we wanted to do reflected our communities and us, and the audiences absolutely loved it. And we had a lot of challenges throughout that process as well, because, Home had identified, they were getting the same people coming day after day to their galleries and to their stuff, and they wanted to show some difference. And I think that what I saw from the audiences and the way they reacted was, for me, that is what I want from the stuff that I create. I want these people, and I know that it's difficult, because those people who are still in charge are still in charge, and so I would love to just go, ignore them. Why do we need to even listen to them? But it's not as easy as that, is it? Because they still hold the strings to all the money. They still are funding everything. But I do think that, as much as we can continue doing the stuff we're doing, that then we're getting more people into galleries. The thing that I love most is going into an art gallery and not whispering, because why do we need to? Going in and sort of being like, oh yes, this is a lovely piece. I would speak normally. I don't need to be quiet. I don't need to change my way just because somebody's going to look at me disgruntled. There's a lot to do with our mindsets, I think, that can be worked on and can be explored.
Yeah,
I'm just going to piggyback off that, because I think I just had a lot of thoughts listening to Josh and also listening to what you had to say, Nat. And as part of my master's course, which is in science communication, we had a few people from what was called the Museum of Science and Industry, is now called the Science and Industry Museum, and they were talking about how, definitely during half term and over the summer holidays, they didn't see so many people of color, they didn't see so many people from certain sort of class backgrounds at the museum, and they were saying, oh well, it's a real shame, and it's free, and we're not seeing that maybe these communities just don't have the cultural capital, and how do we bridge that gap? And it's so interesting, because the moment they come across somebody who is a person of color or a working class person or from one of these disadvantaged communities that they see underrepresented in their audience, they almost see us as a doorway to that community. And so they'll say, oh, what am I doing? What could we possibly do? And often the first question that we're asked is, what should we be doing? Without them sort of applying any sort of, I'm going to say this, common sense to the problem. So one of the things that Alicia, my co-host, and I've realized is often we get paid to come and deliver workshops where we're basically supposed to be teaching usually a bunch of white people how to talk to our communities. And an example of this, which I think is very similar to the museum thing, was we were asked to come to a 2-day conference that talked around about sexual health. And one of the main things that they wanted us to do with the problem was that they felt like communities of color weren't accepting of sex education in schools. And so they threw that problem at us and said, you're two young women who are from, you know, an African background and a South Asian background. So basically tell us like why your communities have an issue, more or less. And we kind of flipped that on its head. So we said, hey, you know, we've got some school teachers in here, we've got some healthcare practitioners here, people who work for the local authority. When you reached out to these communities, what was the response? What did people say? Like maybe you had a focus group, like maybe as teachers you sent out letters home, or you invited parents in to come have a cup of tea and a chat. So what was the response? And they all sat there and just sort of like, oh, we just didn't think that we should have a conversation with these communities. We're just expecting you to come in and be like, why are these communities not coming along to our things? And I think that is where the disconnect is. Like there's this idea of like real art that people are supposed to like go to if they have cultural capital, and then outreach and community art. And the difference between them isn't that like one is real and one isn't. It's that when it comes to outreach and community art, you go to the community and you say, hey guys, what do you want to do? Whereas real art sits there and waits. And to be quite honest, I think just around conversations I've had around visual art, and sort of the canon that exists, a lot of my friends who are like me, you know, young people of color, people who are from like a similar ethnic background or religious background, just like, why do I want to go into a gallery and pay like £5 of my money to look at a bunch of dead white people?
Hey, I totally agree.
So yeah, I think it's that thing of like, it's interesting that's something that caters to whiteness, that caters to like a very middle class suited gaze, and that has a certain price tag attached to it, whether that's the price of the art itself or the price attached to entry to an art space, is considered real, and something that has actually possibly changed lives is not considered real. So yeah, I think this is just the start of the conversation, really.
I think it's really interesting in terms of building-based organisations as well, because it is that thing of build it and they will come first and foremost, and then we have to change. Outreach is about changing other people to get them to come into your program, instead of looking at what's wrong with your program and why your program's not relevant.
Absolutely. My mum has never been to an art gallery up until last summer, when she went to the Whitworth for the first time, and a big part of that was because there was this amazing exhibition on textiles from around the Muslim world, and it was the first thing that she'd ever heard of that had catered to her experience. And they had even done like an event on the 14th and the 15th, which was a weekend at the time, celebrating the independence of Pakistan and India from colonial rule. And going along that weekend, I was like, oh, well, you know, it's not that South Asian people don't go to art galleries or don't think that they, don't realize that they exist or anything like that. It's just the minute you have programming that speaks to us and to our experiences will come in droves. Yeah. Caitlin, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I'm just really thinking, I love that point you made about like real art, in huge inverted commas, sitting and waiting for the people. That's a really nice way of putting it. And it really reminds me of, I think going back to like your question, Nat, about is this the same in theatre and drama? Broadly, yes, but in actuality, not really. I think the face of theatre is probably someone like, what's his name? Andrew Lloyd Webber, who is apparently on a one-man crusade to save theatres, despite the fact that he doesn't really do a lot for what theatre is in this country. Whereas in the last few months, in big theatre buildings, a lot of the people who have been not able to be furloughed, who've been consistently working, have been people in kind of participation and education departments. And it's the least visible work sometimes, but I think it has possibly the most impact. I don't know how much anyone really sees, because I work in participation education. I see it all the time because it's just there and it's what I do. I don't know how much people really realise. And I think, we could shout about it a bit louder, but we don't have the time, we don't have the resource. It's chronically underfunded. And I think also going back to that point about capital, you reach a sort of ceiling, don't you, where you're like, right, it's all very well, this section of people are all democratic, and we're going to kind of, throw away the rule book and do our own thing and make it all really democratic and talk to the people. But actually, sometimes you literally just need cash. You need money to make a project happen. You need money for people to get to your projects. A lot of the time, project costs are like travel and things like that. Sometimes people are really hungry when they turn up at projects. You need to feed them. There are some absolute basics there that you literally cannot do without cash. And, you know, in the last 10 years, there has been a deliberate underfunding of the arts. I don't know how to solve that problem without just funding the arts, but that's possibly not within my remit as a freelance artist. But I honestly think there's a ceiling there that we maybe can't quite solve by ourselves sometimes, which is a bit of a sad note. We're kind of running out of time a bit, but I wonder if anyone else has got any questions. If not, I want to pose a question to Ikra and Josh. What's your favourite thing you've ever done in your career, possibly related to the arts, but just tell me about a favourite moment.
I would say the first thing that came into mind then, like I say, and similar to you, Caitlin, I have to juggle a lot of stuff because I think to make money out of something like this, you need to spin a lot of plates. So I end up, you know, being a producer as well as a filmmaker, as well as a theatre maker, because you have to. And I found myself doing something very odd one year. I decided not to go to uni, and so I decided to say yes to everything. One of them was doing this arts piece dangling off scaffolding in a local community centre, and another was this project at Home Theatre where I signed up for. What I ended up doing there was I got given the main theatre space in this venue, which was, I can't remember how many seater it is, it's massive. But I didn't put a theatre show on. I decided to make a relaxation zone. And it was called Retreat, and it was based on being in the womb as a child. It's the weirdest thing, but it just sticks in my mind. It was a massive tent, like you would maybe find at a festival. And you entered it to like a heartbeat and sort of like a lava lamp effect. And to exit the installation, you had to go down a slide and be born. And that was one of the best things I've ever done. And mainly because I saw literal newborn babies inside it having the time of their lives, whilst also seeing a group of elderly people from my community come in, who I think the youngest is something like 75, get involved, go down the slide and have a great time. So that was one of the things that I see as a highlight, because it's so random. I don't think I'd ever do anything like that again either.
That sounds great. I wish I'd gone on the slide. Ikra, what's your favourite moment?
Oh, well, as a podcaster, I think I had like a proper sort of like pinching myself moment in the summer of, I want to say 2018, so not that long ago. So there's this feminist writer who is Egyptian American, and she had written this amazing book called Headscarves and Hymens: Why the Middle East Needs a Sexual Revolution. And I remember picking it up shortly after it came out and being sort of very skeptical. I was like, here's another book written by another feminist who wants to tell Muslim women what they should do with their bodies and with their lives. And the amazing thing is she's a woman who's lived in Egypt and protested against the Mubarak regime in 2011 when she was assaulted by riot police who broke both of her arms. And the first thing that she did when she came out of hospital was go on TV and be like, here are my arms in casts, you're not going to stop me writing. And she's also lived in Saudi Arabia. She started this like amazing conversation online when the Me Too movement moved to social media, talking about mosque Me Too and sexual assault in holy spaces for Muslim women. And we sort of reached out to her on Twitter because she was going to be at the Bradford Literature Festival, just to ask if we could possibly interview her. And she immediately responded. And that conversation, which I think is episode 9 of our podcast, it's called Starting Revolutions, is still probably one of the favourite conversations I've ever had, and I'm very lucky to be able to call her a friend now as well, which is amazing. But yeah, I think sometimes certain opportunities just arise from like projects that you never ever would have thought would have happened, and to sit down with your feminist hero is really something. So yeah, that's probably my favorite thing I've ever done, just fangirl at my feminist hero on a podcast.
Yeah. Is that Mona Halfway? Yeah, I'll share that in the chat. I'm just conscious of time because I value people's time, and I know we've gone over by kind of little 4 minutes, and there's another session. So are there any more questions from?
Seen in the chat, we've got a question saying, if we could put more funding in the arts, what's the first and maybe second thing that you would put money into? And I want to make a case for if I was in charge, I think there would be a universal, well, this would be if I was in charge of the world, there would be a kind of universal basic income, but it would be a substantial basic income, and everyone would be paid enough to live. You know, and yeah, some people would have to take pay cuts, but you don't need to be earning 600 grand a year. So that's what I'd do. What would you guys do?
Oh God, like I think I'm very much at the same sort of point where I think the one thing this pandemic has showed us is that even within the arts world, like it's really laid bare all of the inequalities. Like one of my friends was talking about like the way that a lot of people who work in front of house in art spaces like galleries and stuff like that are often like in shared accommodation, and then you've got like the gallery manager who's got their like AGA in the background, or is it AGA? I don't know. I've never actually heard it out loud because I'm a working class person and I don't have a fancy oven. And and so my friend was just saying like, you know, just even looking at people's Zoom backgrounds and like the insides of their homes, like really gives you an idea of like how much like financial inequality there is in our sector. And I think if it was up to me to sort of choose where money went, is I would 100% make like Caitlin, take it away from folks who are running arts organizations or like third sector organizations, and then give it to people who like haven't had a chance to like develop their creative practice in any way, shape or form. So yeah, absolutely.
I'd just agree with that.
Just redistribute the wealth.
Yeah, really. Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you, guys. It's been, you know, we could talk for ages and ages. I know there's never enough time. Thank you ever so much